Don't hang around and let your problems surround you. There are movie shows.
Downtown.
Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2021 psychological horror film, Last Night in Soho. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all that extra content. Last Night in Soho stars Thomasin, McKenzie, Anya Taylor-Joy, and Matt Smith, and was directed by Edgar Wright. It tells the story of 60s-obsessed aspiring fashion designer Eloise, played by Thomasin McKenzie, who finds herself mysteriously transported to 1960s London, where she watches the parallel life of an aspiring singer, Sandy, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Like everybody else in the movie sphere, I often hear about films long before they get released, sometimes even before there's much to go on at all. I look forward to a lot of these movies, and may even be excited for them for months, but I rarely anticipate them in the way that I did this film. I am a big fan of Edgar Wright's films, which puts me in the target audience for this type of anticipation anyway. His last foray into the horror genre, Shaun of the Dead, is still my favorite movie of all time after all these years, and I've seen each of his films on the big screen and enjoyed them all. So the whispers of a new Wright film was exciting enough, but then the early reports of this being a 60s set horror film, even more exciting. And then that first trailer hit, and this easily became my most anticipated film of the year. That kind of anticipation could easily lead to disappointment. That's the case with any movie, since you can build something up too much in your head and then be disappointed by the actual product. But this film is especially susceptible to anticipation-based disappointment. It's the kind of film where going in without story knowledge is important, but I do think there are two pieces of information people should know for mental preparation's sake. One, this is unlike any other Edgar Wright film. There are certain trademark aspects of his style that shine through every now and then, but you should know that this is not the next Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz or Baby Driver. And two, this is not your typical horror film. The marketing of this movie has been rightfully enigmatic, however, it has been promoted largely as a horror movie. And while it does have its moments of horror, it's much more of the psychological nature. So if you're going in hoping to be bombarded by scares, you might want to adjust your expectations a little bit. Luckily, even with my high anticipation and without those useful mental preparation warnings, I loved this movie. It just happens to be one of those films that feels tailor-made for me in almost every regard. So let's start with the story. It's a captivating and bizarrely wild experience. It's also one of those stories that's really hard to talk about in a spoiler-free setting. So since this is a spoiler-free review, I've got to keep things pretty vague here, because I don't want to ruin the experience for you. There's a dual temporal nature to this story, with some of it taking place in present day, and some of it taking place in the mid-1960s. I'm not going to spoil or talk about the connection there, but it's an intriguingly mysterious and thought-provoking premise that I really enjoyed. But even beyond the premise mechanism here, this story was so interesting. It takes a lot of different turns, each revealing yet another piece of information that you can't wait to learn more about and see exactly how it fits into the larger picture. I gotta say, I haven't been this engrossed by a new release in quite a while. So to illustrate that, when I watch a movie that I intend to review, I always take notes. Even when I go to the theater, I bring a little notepad and sit there in the dark, blindly writing notes as I watch. I've been doing this for years, so it's a nothing second nature thing to me now. It doesn't draw my attention away from the movie, but I'm always cognizant of the fact that I'm taking notes, and can remember specific moments when I go back to review them. So one of the things that I always write down as part of these notes is a few potential quotes to use in the written reviews that I do. So when I got home from Last Night in Soho and got ready to sit down and transcribe my notes so they'd be a little easier to read, I had this disappointed realization that I hadn't written down any quotes and was kind of annoyed with myself. So I start transcribing and come across a quote that I didn't remember writing down. I keep going and come across another, and then another. And so I had all these quotes and a bunch of notes that I didn't even remember writing because I was so transfixed by the movie. That has never happened to me before. So I think it's a testament to this film and the power of its intrigue. In addition to the excellent and captivating story, this film also features some incredibly interesting and compelling characters. Thomasin McKenzie stars as the main protagonist of the film, Eloise. She's an aspiring fashion designer living in present-day London, who's a bit of an anachronistic outcast, preferring to immerse herself in the music and fashion of the 1960s. Because of this, she's very self-conscious and lacks confidence. But an interesting thing about Last Night in Soho is that it has a second protagonist. Eloise is definitely our main protagonist, but not far behind is Anya Taylor-Joy's Sandy, an aspiring singer living in 1960s London. Unlike Eloise, she's brimming with confidence, and as a result of the story's premise, we get some very interesting exploration of these characters. As in all of Wright's films, there are quite a few secondary and tertiary characters that make a big impact too, but as of right now at least, this film stands apart from the rest of his filmography, because this is the first time he's had a female character as the protagonist. He's had some great female characters before, Liz from Shaun of the Dead, Ramona Flowers from Scott Pilgrim, but they've never been the protagonist. Here, we've got two female protagonists, not to mention a number of integral secondary characters, including Diana Rigg's final performance as Miss Collins. One of my favorite things about Edgar Wright's films has always been the editing. He typically employs a very kinetic editing style, with quick cuts that often invoke some comedy. That signature style doesn't really show up here, making it one of the many things that strays from the typical Wright film. However, that doesn't mean the editing is bad here. In fact, it's really strong and does a great job of creatively and stylishly linking the two components of the film. There's definitely a bit more of an artistic flair to the editing, with some superb transitions. Really, the entire visual style on display here is superb. The colors really pop and do a great job of helping to distinguish between our two time periods. The cinematography is also wonderful, with some really impressive shot composition, lighting, and camera movement. There's one scene in particular that involves 3 people dancing that I suspect was shot practically, which, when you see it, you'll see how impressive that is. So I'm really looking forward to the Blu-ray and hopefully a lot of special features, because I really want to see the behind-the-scenes production of that. The visual style of this film also draws very heavily from its influences. Much like Eloise, it's clear that Edgar Wright is also enamored with the 60s, and this film really reflects that, quite literally in many instances. The use of mirrors and other reflective surfaces help to define the visual style, but are also really important plot-wise and thematically. Films from the 1960s visibly bleed over into this film, like cinematic ghosts from the past. Esoteric psychological thrillers and horrors have their stamp here, as do Italian giallo films of the 60s and 70s. Structural hallmarks of those types of stories weave their way into this plot, but there are significant visual homages as well. The colorful lighting, the jumpy editing of certain moments, the frequent wide-eyed reaction shots, even the actual horror elements of this film are reminiscent. It makes use of CGI at times, which obviously wasn't around back then, but somehow still manages to capture that classic feeling. So, we've talked about a lot of things that Edgar Wright did differently with this film, but is there anything that's typical of his usual style? The use of music. Much like the editing, the way that Wright incorporates music into his films has always been one of my favorite things about his style, going all the way back to Shaun of the Dead. Baby Driver put that aspect front and center within its story, but there's always been a clear connection and integration between music and plot in his films. And Last Night in Soho is no different in that regard, incorporating a lot of music, often diegetically. If you've been following my reviews for a little while, you know how much I love music. And I've talked about my love for 60s music especially on a number of occasions. A good chunk of my Once Upon a Time in Hollywood review consists of me gushing over the soundtrack. Ever since I was a little kid, I've been a 60s music nerd. I'm like Eloise in that sense. I listen to it all the time, probably more than I do music from any other time period. I go to concerts of bands from the 60s. Like, this is my music. So, needless to say, I was absolutely geeking out over the music here. Right from the start, music is huge. We hear music all the time, but we also get glimpses of a bunch of records, all of which eventually had songs from them played throughout the movie, which I thought was really cool. We also get instances of live music, one being a really solid cover by Anya Taylor-Joy, and another being a real artist from the time period. Obviously an actor playing her, but still really cool. This film was just loaded with great songs, and not your typical 60s set movie songs either. I mean, I love the zombies more than the average person. Odyssey and Oracle is literally my favorite album of all time, but there's only so many times you can listen to Time of the Season in a movie. Now, I wouldn't say most of the songs and artists in this film are necessarily deep cuts, but they might be for people who aren't as familiar with 60s music. But it's so good! We've got Peter and Gordon, Cilla Black, Petula Clark, The Kinks, The Searchers, Barry Ryan, and I've gotta say, ever since the title of this film was first announced, I had this nerdy anticipation/hope that the song Last Night in Soho would feature. That one definitely is a bit of a deep cut, and I'm just giddy thinking about it now, and the fact that hopefully so many people are now going to be introduced to the joy and oddity that is Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Titch. Not to mention the fact that it's like a perfect song for this movie, even putting aside the obvious title connection. Last Night in Soho probably isn't going to be the film you expect it to be. Whether that's because you're already a big fan of Edgar Wright, or because of the marketing, or some other reason, I think this is a movie that's gonna catch people off guard, for better or for worse. I get the sense that this one may end up being fairly divisive. When things really get going in this movie, there's a point where you're either going to be all in or sitting there thinking, what am I watching? And I love that Edgar Wright has a film like that now. It helps that I fall into the former all-in category here, but this is truly a fascinating film on a number of levels, whether you like the movie or not. I rarely feel this excited about a film after a first watch, so I, for one, cannot wait to see it again. For Last Night in Soho, I let my life go. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one has gotta be the music. This probably doesn't really come as too much of a surprise considering how much I've been gushing about it in the review, but the music here was perfect. Not only was the music selection amazing, ranging from Cilla Black to Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Titch, but its integration and incorporation into the story was wonderfully done as well. It helps to set the mood and atmosphere, but also has an important role in the story too, which only makes its diegetic use all the more exciting. The second pro is the story itself. So unfortunately, I have to be super vague here because I don't want to spoil anything. This movie's premise and plot doesn't lend itself particularly well to a spoiler-free setting, but I can say that this was a very satisfyingly crafted story. The idea of our two time periods and their connection was incredibly cool on its own, but then we've got this whole expansive story from it. Part fantasy, part parable, part psychological thriller, all completely captivating. Pro number three is the visual style. So this kind of incorporates a few things. The editing, the cinematography, even just the general look and feel of the movie. It's so unlike anything else that Edgar Wright's done before, yet when you look at it, it doesn't not look like Edgar Wright. I know the double negative's confusing, but I don't know how else to explain the bizarre quality here. It's this unique cross between almost his typical style and the style that was typical in genre films from the time period in which this film, or at least part of the film, is set. On the con side, I'm genuinely surprised to say that I don't have any major negatives here, so it's just minor nitpicks. There are a few moments, particularly those involving CGI, that border on being a little visually cheesy at times, but as I mentioned before in the review, I was all in on this film at that point, so it honestly didn't pull me out of the movie, though I could see it potentially doing just that to some people. This movie's also got some wild stuff that happens, and there's this one character in particular who I enjoyed, but thought was almost unbelievably accepting and understanding and nice, given the circumstances. Again, not really an issue, just something I noticed that kind of stands out a bit after the fact. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying any of the films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Last Night in Soho 4.5 out of 5 paws. This movie's got a really interesting story, a set of compelling characters, and both a visual and sonic aesthetic that works perfectly for the story being told. As many of you guys have probably noticed over the years, I rarely give new releases anything over 4 paws. For me to really love a movie, I generally need at least a couple watches. So a 4.5 right out of the gate is a big deal for me. And as of right now, with only 2 months left, this is my favorite film of the year. I would recommend Last Night in Soho to fans of psychological thrillers and horrors, especially those from the 1960s. In fact, I think people who are fans of the 60s in general, the music, the fashion, the culture, will probably be more likely to like this one than people who couldn't care less about the time period. I do think many existing fans of Edgar Wright will enjoy this film, but it's important to note that this is very different from his past films. This is not a comedy, and is tonally quite a bit darker and more serious than anything he's done before. So if you go in with the mindset that this is just going to be another Edgar Wright movie, you might find yourself a bit disappointed. If you liked Last Night in Soho, I would recommend Repulsion. This one's a classic when it comes to 60s psychological horror, and has a lot of overlap and similarities with the psychological aspects of Last Night in Soho, especially regarding both of their main protagonists. If you're interested in another movie that clearly served as inspiration for this one, you should check out Blood and Black Lace. It's one of the earlier Italian giallo films and is hugely influential to decades worth of movies, including this one. Elements of the plot have some similarities, and there's also a pretty distinctive visual flair that kind of set the groundwork for many giallo films and giallo-inspired films. And if you want another movie about obsession with the past, you might want to watch Don't Look Now. This one came out a little later, in the early 70s, but it's one that I immediately thought of when I first saw the trailer for Last Night in Soho. It's a strange thriller with some stylistic similarities, and is also filled with haunting misdirects. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Last Night in Soho? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite movie that's a departure from its director's usual style? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.